Hello, friends. I'm Rabbi Greg, and welcome to Torah Saturday. We are going to be looking at the first parsha in the book of Numbers, called Bamidbar. If you watched Torah Tuesday and saw me put together a source sheet, this is actually a different source sheet today. I just wasn't happy with what I came up with on Tuesday. And actually, in the live stream, at one point, I said, I'm crashing and burning. It just was not coming together. So I came across some really interesting things later in the week. So we've put that together for today's conversation. Let's say the blessing for Torah study together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Well, for those of you who saw my sermon last night, I talked about how I used to find the beginning of Book of Numbers just really boring. It's just a lot of names of people, names of men who are leaders of this tribe or that, and just these long recitations of different numbers. But as always, if you dig below the surface, there are some pretty interesting things that we can find. So that's what we'll start working on today. As always, please feel free to bring in your own sources, your own ideas. And if you're watching this video, head over to rabbigregmarcus.com and look for the Torah Tuesday, Torah Saturday, and sign up for the list and come join us in person. May I have a volunteer to unmute and read Numbers 1, chapter 1, 1 to 3?
I can go.
Thank you.
On the first day of the second month, in the second year following the Exodus from the land of Egypt, the divine spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting, saying, "Take a census of the whole Israelite company of fighters by the clans of its ancestral houses, listing the names, every male head by head. You and Aaron shall record them by their groups, from the age of 20 years up, all those in Israel who are able to bear arms."
Okay. So we see just in this next commentary, why are all these dull details necessary? So we'll get to that rabbi's take. But I'm curious, what are things that you might notice about this?
There's a bit of a militaristic take on it.
Hmm.
Leaders, adults bearing arms, people,
Hmm.
people capable of standing up, so it seems.
I noticed the age of 20 as being significant, since you become a bar mitzvah at age 13, but you're not ready to bear arms yet. I think that's
Hmm.
wise.
Yeah, yeah. And that age of 20 becomes important later in the book of Numbers. But yeah, this is okay. We're going to have some fighting to do. How many fighters do we have? All right, that makes sense. Um, Dave.
It's obvious to me that they're anticipating that they're going to have to fight. They've just left Egypt and
Mhm.
they're getting ready to organize war.
Mhm. Yeah, that's right. That's right. This is kind of a foreshadowing that fighting is ahead. We look at this as this is the beginning of a book. I mean, each book of the Torah is its own distinct book with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And here in the beginning, strong foreshadowing that there's going to be fighting ahead because we got to see who are capable of fighting. What do you think of this beginning on the first day of the second month in the second year following the exodus from the land of Egypt?
It definitely feels like an epic, like one of these stories where you talk about the time and the place and the lineage, and that it's the beginning of a campaign or of a struggle or something.
Yes. And the trope kind of echoes that as well. So the first part, the Hebrew begins with Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe Bamidbar Sinai be'ochel moed. This is the divine spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting, saying, um, in the tent of meeting. But then it goes into this. Um, then it goes into the other part, and so this on the first day of the second month, the way it reads with the trope is Be'echad Yahodesh Hasheni B'Shana Hasheni Litzeitem Me'eretz Mitzrayim Lemor. So you get this Be'echad one. LeChodesh Sheni, one, the first of the day of the second month. They really kind of, in its own poetic way, sort of add that Cecil B. DeMille epic. This wasn't just any day. This wasn't then they went out and watered the cattle. It's like, no, we're going to start mustering the troops here.
What was interesting to me in one of the commentaries I was reading with Richard Friedman,
Yeah.
Okay, he talks about the context of this of Numbers itself as being about this journey where miracles become kind of the everyday experience that they have, and it's an example of the ideal and the terrible, and the fact that once you build an army, once you build resources for war, then it's inevitable. And it said there are power struggles and fear, and they're pictured as having been almost entirely avoidable. But once you form an army, you have almost predetermined that you're going to use it.
Interesting.
I thought that was meaningful to me.
I'm hearing background information from someone. I don't know if that's from Anita or Allison Neal, but it almost sounds like a radio or something. Okay, well, it just stopped. So that's an interesting point, Anita, that once you start building this army, then it kind of reminds me Costa Rica got rid of its army in 1858. And it somehow managed to survive, and it stayed a democracy that whole time. There were no coups, there was no death squads, there were none of the things that plagued a lot of its neighbors that maintained their armies. Okay, let's go a little bit further. Somebody read the second one.
I can go.
Thank you.
Rabbi Isaac Arama in the 1400s asked why all the seemingly dull details of the census are necessary. Did the divine not know the number of Israelites encamped in the desert in any case? Taking account of them one by one, Rav Arama argues, serves to teach that each one has individual worth and is not just a member of the collective, They were all equal in stature, Arama writes, and yet the stature of each one was different. Rabbi Mel Gottlieb teaches in
Wait,
this
let's
week's
just pause there. Let's, because Rabbi Gottlieb expands on this point, but let's just go to this first point. So, what's Rabbi Arama's? What's he teaching?
The importance of the individual, the
Uh-huh.
individual's voice. Rabbi Sachs comments on that issue too in his book that in this section of Numbers, while the majority rules, each voice it's important for each voice to be heard,
Hmm.
and the importance of the individuals and the individuals' ideas and responsibilities. Where
Yeah.
to stand up and be counted, to stand up and be and participate, to stand up and be holy.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I think that that's a place that a number of commentators go, like, well, what's the relationship between the group and the individual? And um, here we're seeing that, he says each one has individual worth. Now, is that true that each member of the tribe had individual worth based on these texts?
Each male over the age of 20.
Yes. Yes. Um, and I wonder, it almost feels like a blind spot. I'm sure it was a blind spot, or it was just, in the 15th century, it would never occur to a rabbi, I don't think, at least to my knowledge, to sort of question the patriarchy, the maleness of this. That's just kind of the way it was back in biblical days. That's kind of the way it was in the 15th century.
That's who was capable of fighting because women had a very important role and didn't have a lot of options but to be pregnant. So there were a lot of reasons women couldn't fight.
Yes.
Of course, there are biblical stories of women who were very successful in war, like Deborah.
Yes. No, there were a few. You had your Joan of Arcs in Europe, but these were exceptions. But he's sort of generalizing that by counting each one, they have individual worth, and doesn't say that women don't have worth, but it's just silent. It's just like they're not there. They're just invisible in this telling.
So something that strikes me from a little bit different flavor is nowadays when a military is assembled, about the only reason that the general public hears about a soldier is when they've become a casualty. And I think of the times of Israel talking about that Lieutenant so and so was killed in a campaign defending or attacking or something. We almost never hear about anybody until they're either injured or gone. And here there's a bit more of an emphasis on while they're alive, they should be counted and measured. And nowadays, it seems like only when we lose somebody do we kind of stand in regret over the resource that we lost.
Yeah.
Well, in the culture of the military, the individual is not as important as the group. I mean, they do everything they can to make sure you identify yourself as a member of a group, member of a platoon or a squad or a company or whatever. And that mission is the focus, not your individual goals and needs. So kind of whoop it out of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So an interesting contrast with from certainly the standpoint of modern military theory, we don't want people just freelancing out on the battlefield. They really need to be focused on the mission. Here, um, you know, we're reading this with a spiritual lens. We're not trying to figure out what, how well they could fight. We're looking for, we're looking for different types of lessons. Dave.
Um, Already this brings a whole lot of thoughts. Um, so I think something that I don't hear discussed hardly ever is the transition of the Jewish people from its origins as a herding migratory group. Certainly, Abraham was not a farmer, he was part of a herding society. Um, I mean, he came from Babylon, which was settled, but he was not himself a farmer. Um, and I think the early Jewish people knew that they were migratory and herders to a farming settled set of people. And I think all of these stories are trying to explain how we went from the Abrahamic world to the Mosaic world. And so we have one metaphorical or really mythic story of becoming slaved in Egypt and then being freed by God from that. And there's a whole lot of wonderful stories about that and warnings about how to behave well. And then we get into this point where we leave Egypt, and whoever is writing this immediately starts talking about war and conquering and setting up a nation state, um, getting ready to kill a whole lot of people. This set of texts are, I think, trying to explain how we got from migratory to sedentary. And I'm not sure that I believe the story of the slavery in Egypt. I don't think there's very much historical evidence of it at all. And I don't think there's a whole lot of evidence of us conquering Palestine or what later became Israel. I think, in fact, there is a whole lot of history and evidence of the collapse of the Bronze Age, in which all these places that were said to have conquered were emptied by some group of bloodthirsty people who wiped out town and city and nation all over the eastern Mediterranean. And then we were, from what evidence we have, herders living in the hills, the hills over the Jordan River in that area. And we moved down into these cities. And so now there's people trying to explain how we set up all these armies and conquered all these people and wiped them all out. We might have been able to ignore that for the last couple thousand years, but these stories have got consequences now. These are what are being used by a lot of the far right in Israel to explain, and here in the United States, to explain why it's okay to wipe out people that are living in Palestine. And that's problematic, and I'm not sure that these stories are innocuous any longer. Um,
Well, Dave,
but
thank you for sharing that. And I guess what I will say is that, the scripture and all of our stories are powerful and they can be weaponized and, used to justify slavery and used to justify all kinds of things, which, well, I'm going to justify this one thing here by this one sentence there or this group of stories here. But taken as a whole, our teachings wouldn't support those actions. So the issues around the land are particularly problematic, but I think it is an important watch out not to allow these stories to be weaponized and used in ways that go against, what I would say are the larger community of Jewish values. Let's come back to sort of maybe this next reading here, which Neil had started. Let's see, is this going to let me? Um, okay, so Rabbi Mel Gottlieb.
Would you like me to continue?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Rabbi Mel Gottlieb teaches, in this week's Parsha, we read count, lift up the heads of all the congregation. The expression siu et rosh literally means raise the heads of each person, intimating the importance of each and every individual. It is not simply counting, but distinguishing every individual as precious, so the individual knows they are precious. Hence the charge to lift up through counting.
All right, thank you, Mel. So what's he saying about this idea? Um, is this just counting? And it should be read colon count or read count, lift up the heads of all the congregation should be in quotes or italics. I just didn't do that. Um, so what's Rabbi Gottlieb's point? What's he saying here?
Well, we've got a cliche today. I'm a name, not a number, and it feels as if when you call somebody up by name, you give them honor, respect, simple acknowledgement as an individual, whereas a number is a statistic, interchangeable, fungible, really no uniqueness, no identity.
Mhm. Yeah, the richness of the Hebrew, the lift up the head. I mean, yeah, it could just be the turn of speech, but we don't, one interpretive tool is we don't think any word is an accident in the Torah. And so this this idea of lifting up the head, it's not just, okay, count off one, two, three, four. It's almost like someone walks up to each person and lifts their head as you're counted as an individual.
What I would hope it would mean is that it isn't just the body or having a person there that's contributing to our, the stability or the capability of the whole community, but also acknowledging that each individual brings gifts and talents and in contributions that could be very unique, and therefore we're not all the same. Each one of us is. When I see the word precious, I don't just think in terms. I think of value, and I think when I think of individuals, I think what the value they bring are themselves, their individuality, their ability to, contribute their special skills or knowledge or ideas or support. So I'm hoping maybe that's what somebody meant.
No, I think that's really well said. And I do want to say about Rabbi Mel Gottlieb, he was the president of my seminary when I went there, and he was one of the founders. He was really just an amazing person, and he's also a psychologist and a Jungian, and so he's really, really neat guy, incredibly knowledgeable on Torah. This distinguishing every individual as precious so the individual knows they are precious. It reminds me of a teaching of Rabbi Akiva saying that we were given two gifts. One, the first gift is we were made in the divine image. And the second gift is we were told we were made in the divine image, kind of for the same idea. So we have that ability to understand that lineage, the opportunity we have to kind of live up to those ideals. And, on a personal note, my father was very proud of me, but he was not very good at saying he was proud of me. So, he did not make it known to me that I had that, place. Sort of have to read the tea leaves to kind of figure that out or hear secondhand accounts. So this is powerful. This is really powerful to tell people that they count and they matter.
I know that there's a tradition among some rabbis that you don't want to count people by just going around and saying person one, person two, person three. And I think it's somewhat related to this parsha, but I can't remember exactly.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't remember the details of that either, but there are some prohibitions against taking a census or reluctance to.
I was also thinking of there's the song Secret Agent Man where they uh,
Mhm.
give you a number and take away your name.
Hmm.
So that is a change. In this case, it's a change that gives you certain power, but it is a change.
Hmm. Yeah.
And when you think about certain critics of the of social media, when they refer to the fact that anonymity gives you permission to do things you might not otherwise do if you're if you're known to other people, maybe being counted, being recognized, and being known is another strategy in the group dynamic to help people obey the law, knowing that they're known to other people and their behavior counts.
Yeah. Yeah, what you're saying reminds me of that phrase, stand up and be counted. It's like, yeah, there's a little bit of a moral valence to that as well. Okay, so let's look at this Hebrew. What is that? Does anybody recognize it? It's from a Torah scroll.
I read ahead, so I once I read ahead, I realized, of course, it's the Shema.
Uh-huh. And what do we notice about the way the Shema is written in the Torah scroll, either from looking or from reading ahead?
Neil, you noticed
Well,
without reading ahead.
there's some stylized script where ayin and a dalet are really big.
Yeah. So Shema, the first word, the Ayin is big. Echad, the Dalet is big. So the route, if you take these two together, it spells the word ed, which means witness. And so we are sort of declaring the oneness of the divine, but there's a lot we could sort of pull into this idea of ed. Well, I thought about this today because, oh, this is not something weird happened. So, if we go back to verse 2 here, Seuet Rosh, this is the lift up every head, Kol Adat B'nai Yisrael. Here it is again, Aid, Adat B'nai Yisrael. This um, Taf is making it's like a conjunction between these words. All of the Ed of the children of Israel. And this is translated as congregation. So, you know, lift up the head of every witness, the whole congregation. I don't know. I'm just curious because this struck me. I'm not quite sure what to make of it, but I'd love to know what you think. Is there um, something there? What does this kind of bring up for you?
there's to me, it feels as if there's an emphasis on being active rather than being passive. A
Mm,
witness has a responsibility as opposed to just being somebody there in the room. It's
mm.
you need to take what you've seen or what you've heard and make it real for yourself and for others.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like a small synagogue like B'nai Torah. We all have to kind of, if you want to just show up and be anonymous in the back of the synagogue, you can do that, but it's pretty hard because somebody's going to come talk to you. And somebody's going to ask you to participate in something. Dave.
Well, it's an interesting and important um, emphasis that in the prior verse we're talking about how precious the individual is, but here we're talking about how the individual is part of the congregation of Israel, and it's not just the individual, but the whole congregation as a group, which bears witness to the the fact that Hashem is one. And in fact, there's lots of instances in which it's emphasized in the Torah that we worship together. We don't worship alone. We say the Kaddish together. We don't say it as one, and we have to wait for 10. Um, and so our witness before God or with God is as a group, not as an individual.
Mm,
However important we may be as individuals, we are part of this group where we are all, in quotes, equal to each other, but we form this group which together worships God.
yeah. Now earlier, Dave, you and others were kind of intimating at the beginning of this book, we're sort of seeing the beginning of nation formation, society formation. What is that dynamic that they've described? Sort of tell us about that society.
One commentary that I have says Numbers is the story of a people coming to terms with having a constitution of laws and also coming to terms with their relationship of holiness with the deity.
Hmm.
Do that, they must understand their relationship with each other.
Hmm.
So miracles occur as every day, whether it's men or whatever, water. They have the rules that they were given in Leviticus are now being translated into everyday activities. The work is being distributed among different tribes. The rules for the Levites and the Kohanim are being set aside, and their preparation for a future. This whole change from being slaves to being a nation occurs through figuring out what all the laws that they were given means in terms of their behavior and their relationship with themselves and God, I think.
Yeah, that's
I,
great.
I know that in some Christian denominations, there's a part of worship that has to do with witnessing, and um, I don't really know much more than that, but that being a witness of something is
Mhm.
part of worship in, a religion that's has some relationship to ours.
Is that, do you know what they do when they witness? Does that mean like proclaiming something, or I don't know what that means?
Not sure either. I think
It's okay.
it's
I'll look it up. I can look
yeah,
it up.
probably about their relationship with God.
And I think Dave is onto something really important, that we each have a voice. However, how our voice is used relative to the community is also critical. That words once said can uplift or they can hurt, and we need to take responsibility for pointing those words on a path that helps the community, not that destroys the community.
Yeah. And I think maybe to take this witness piece a little further, we need to be there. We need to be part of the community to witness it for ourselves. I had the Elie Wiesel, the great Holocaust survivor and educator who dedicated his life to trying to prevent genocide and human rights atrocities around the world. He said the most important thing you can do is you need to show up. You need to witness it for yourself. You need to be there.
I was reading some modern story recently about a historical figure who was a Quaker, and the Quakers back in the time of the American Revolution put an incredible importance on showing up at the weekly meeting. And it wasn't just about prayer, it was about being there in the community. And not showing up at the meetings and making excuses or ignoring the pleas of people to be there was enough to get you kicked out entirely, to be
Wow.
excommunicated, basically.
Wow. All right. Well, let's go a little further because we're not done with this idea. Oh man. Okay. So a couple more little snippets. The Israelites shall camp each household with its standard under the banner of their ancestral house. They shall camp around the tent of meeting at a distance. And it goes on to say, this one shall be to the east, and this other
Yeah.
tribe will be next to them. And it really gives everybody a place. So now we go back to Rabbi Mel's take on this. Have a volunteer to read this next section. Probably can't see it. Okay. There we go. The
I'll
bib-
do it.
Thank
The
you.
biblical picture of being a wild community.
Should be a whole community, sorry.
Okay. The biblical picture of being a whole community is quite elegant. It consists of a common center around which are grouped diverse bodies. Its foundation is unity, but not uniformity. Picture the scene in the wilderness. They are aggregated by a common attachment to the central sanctuary, the ark. It is the center of the people, around it on all sides and directions of the 12 tribes, not as an individual mass, but as distinct sections, each recognizable by the tribal banner. There was an oneness, the unity created by accepting the diverse elements around the ark. Although each tribe was distinct, they were bound up by a common destiny. Each tribe was to maintain a distinct identity and yet be a unit in the whole. Easier said than done.
Say more.
I just anytime individuals are bound together with a common identity, part of that is distinguishing themselves from others. So valuing the things that we have in common versus the things that separate us has been a constant dilemma in the human condition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find that even like cultures that say they value individuality, like, the Facebook or these social media companies in the early days, like, come dressed however, wear your jeans, wear your shorts, express who you are as an individual. And I never worked there, but I always suspected that the person who their individuality was to show up in the three-piece suit would not be considered part of the group. So even in those, there are always invisible boundaries around what you can and can't do.
When I was stationed in Korea, I think one of the things that was one of the things that was the most, I can't think of the right word, but it was the most abrasive to me in certain situations was the social valuing of the group over the individual. The fact that individuals didn't count at all. We had an agreement between the United States and South Korea that all of the endeavors were 50% ROC Army and 50% US, together. And I remember the people that were assigned to my the ward that I was the head nurse on were just referred to as, not by name, but the soldier, the corpsman, the whatever the title was, but they, and a lot of them didn't wear name tags back then. So that was very that was just part of their culture, that their identity was buried in favor of the group goal so that the group could be successful. It wasn't always bad, but it was very different than what I had been used to.
Mhm. So you're talking about the Korean army culture that you
Yeah.
were working
Or the
with?
Korean, just Korea. I mean, civilians, army, everybody. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
none of the schools did. I never saw any. The only time I saw children school age children that weren't in a uniform were those like when we went out to some of the orphanages, maybe. But they were always dressed exactly alike back then. Of course, we're talking a long time ago. Things
Sure.
have changed now,
Yeah.
but that was, and they were very successful. I mean, like one of the things that I thought negatively at first, but I came to see, by the time when it was time to go home, that they were very successful in helping the children to be independent of their parents. So that, I think it's because they were all this one mass, and so they relied on each other. They would carry them around on their backs until they went to school, and then they'd send them off to school by themselves at 6 years old in the middle of Seoul. You see these little kids walking around with their backpacks and no parents, and I'm like freaking out, and they're just fine. Thank you. I'm the one that had the problem. But so, uh, the idea of what value there is in identifying the individual and making the individual important, it can be very relative to the goals and the needs of the society, and the meaning to the individuals in it, I guess. And I'm not always privy to that. So
Thank you, Anita. Dave.
It occurs to me that what Anita said is reflecting the radical nature of Judaism.
Say more.
Well, we have a personal relationship with God, but we worship in community. We value the individual, but we have to worship together.
Mhm.
Um, we're not expected to obey without thinking. Um, we argue with God. We argue with each other. Um, the the whole idea of Judaism seems interactive and very active and um, very creative, and it's got to be really different from other societies back then, and basically a lot of what I sense in some forms of Christianity, that you're supposed to have an idea and obey that idea. That's not us at all.
Yeah, we are very different. And I'm wondering what elements do we see of that modern culture that are just in these first, in Numbers 2:2 that we just looked at.
I think one thing that's emerging listening to our conversation is that both the individual and the community matter. The Asian emphasis on harmony tends to push the individual into the background. They continue to exist. However, they exist only in a primary role of supporting the community. We are encouraged to enrich ourselves and to explore things as individuals. However, at the end of the day, we all come together, and if we can't find a way to exist in community, we need to go back and think a bit harder about what it is that we're struggling with and how to reconcile things. There are many other societies where individuals were all that mattered, that it was the strongest and the loudest that rose to the top. And I'm hearing the duality, the incredible challenge of how to become the most you can and contribute, find a way to fulfill the societal vision, the relationship with the divine, while maximizing your individuality.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Neil. And I'm looking again at Rabbi Gottlieb's what he wrote, a foundation is unity but not uniformity. You know, around the 10 or 12 tribes, not as an individual mass, but as distinct sections. And maybe this Korean society model that Anita experienced was a little bit more towards the indivisible mass side. All the children are wearing uniforms and there's not name tags, and people are referred to by their rank within the society and not as individuals. And it's pretty different. These are pretty different models than us. But if the Book of Numbers is about really trying to kind of set up that society, then this is a pretty big plank. We are the children of Israel, Yisrael, the one El is the word for name of God, the ones who wrestle with God. That's at the core of who we are. And we see in later things the tribes are fighting with each other. It's not like that unity is not easy to maintain. Um, it wasn't then, it isn't now. And there were times in our history when there was civil war, and that was a disaster. And I think it has been long held a belief within Jewish community and within Israel that no matter what, you can't go past a certain line. And part of my concern is, are some people pushing going past a certain line? That's debatable, but it is a concern of mine. Anita.
Um, I was just looking at another commentary that was referring to understanding the organization, around the tabernacle. It said many commentators note the details here of tribal encampments as a way of emphasizing the need for order and organization and achieving a spiritual life. Simcha Sissel Ziv writes, a person's disorderly in behavior is also confused in thought, incapable of stable, consistent work. So they were giving a little bit different, or an additional, maybe not necessarily different, but an additional meaning behind the organization.
Thank you. I love that. Simcha Zissel Zev was a big Musar master of the 19th century. All right, let's look in a slightly different direction. And this is going to relate a little bit to what I talked about last night. So this is a midrash talking about this beginning section, and it says the divine spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. Why the wilderness? So from here, the Torah was given with three elements, with fire, with water, and in the wilderness, or it could also be translated with wilderness. So, and my sermon is up on YouTube and our Facebook page if you want to read it, because I talked a lot about this in the wilderness. So, but someone kind of, will just skip ahead. Why was it given with these three elements? Could someone read the bold?
Why was it given with these three elements? It is that just as these are free for all mankind, so matters of Torah are free, as it is stated. Ho, everyone who is thirsty, go to water. Another matter. The Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. It is that anyone who does not render himself like a wilderness, accessible to all, is unable to acquire wisdom and the Torah. That is why it is stated in the wilderness of Sinai.
What does it mean, render himself like a wilderness?
Empty, open, without barriers, no fences. Vulnerable.
Thanks. That helps. Now it makes sense to me.
Yeah. So what do we think about that? Totally different take and direction, right? We went from talking about how a society should form and the relationship with the individual, the tribe, the people. Here it's gone, what is this Midrash talking about?
The wilderness is sort of the opposite of a society here. It is the possibility.
Hmm. Yeah, a possibility
Uh, for creating a society, for gaining wisdom.
yeah, I think it's less about creating a society, but who gains wisdom? We see words like everyone and anyone. I think this is individual advice. And this is how we can read the Torah about society, but this is like about our personal growth.
So I guess I was trying to make the analogy of in the wilderness, Moses was speaking to this rabble who was um, forming something new, and the ability to gain wisdom is to come in from a place of
Inquiry.
inquiry and
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah.
Kind of building on what Allison said, if we think about all the years in the wilderness were needed to move us from the slave mentality to being a nation,
Mhm.
part of that is developing a relationship with God and our relationship with the laws of the Torah. And it takes time, and it takes introspection, and it takes a lot of wisdom gain. So that and sharing those is what's going to bring us together as a community of Israel. I would say. I don't know. I don't mean to be putting words in your mouth, Allison, but that's kind of what I heard.
I would add on a little bit to what Allison said, that there was a whole lot of conventional wisdom about how the major ancient societies worked, their system of laws, their system of who had power and who didn't. And when you get out in nature, a lot of that stuff kind of leaves your mind. You're more open to
Yeah.
consideration
Mhm.
that maybe that isn't the way the world works. The world in front of you has infinite possibility and not a whole lot of no trespassing signs and not a whole lot of guards holding spears in front of you, and you can see new paths to get from here to there.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that, Neil. It does open us up. But I'm trying to think, this is reminding me of kind of teaching situations where you're having a conversation with someone, say, oh, you know, whatever, you're explaining something, they're like, no, no, that's not the way things are, or that's not the way I experience it. And it can just be a closed mind, a defensiveness, a holding on to, there's no way that I could possibly be wrong, or I'm just too traumatized to take in any new information, right? I mean, that's can be part of this as well. Sometimes that kind of reaction can be a trauma response. Um, but if you're in that place, you can't acquire the wisdom of Torah. So we could also see this as, maybe it's a group therapy session in some way. We gotta let ourselves be open to change with this whole new way of life, this whole new set of rules, and you got to be at least a little bit open to give it a try and see how it's going to work.
Well, one of the big premises of most therapeutic modalities in psychiatry is that you have to, in order to be open to change, you have to be uncomfortable with something. You have to make somebody uncomfortable enough with something that they're willing to give up wherever they're at and move to something different.
Yeah.
And it would seem to me that this whole idea of kind of what Dave and Allison and Neil were referring to, how they were defining the wilderness, um, in so many ways, that having the unknown, not having the rules and the fences around them, and they might not have liked it, but they knew what was expected of them as a slave, right? Well,
Yes.
out there, everything's changed, and that does open up people to change.
Yeah.
Um, and hopefully, the what was handed down in Leviticus would tell them the direction that their change should take.
Yeah. Thank you, Anita. Okay, we're going to give Dave the last word today.
I like what Ellison and Neil and Anita and you have said, that um, leads me to back to the wilderness. If you were in the wilderness, you were open and without defense. You were vulnerable, and when you're faced with water from the sky and fire from the mountain, you're put in a position of awe, and God is speaking to you in fire and water and wind, and um, that's a yeah, you shouldn't be threatened by that, but it's certainly a position in which that vulnerability can be frightening. So if you try not to be frightened by it and to learn in that setting, what marvel you must have.
Yes. Yes. And when we have these kind of overwhelming experiences, that sometimes that can inspire us to change just in and of itself. Um, but that old joke about how many scientists or how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? Zero, but the light bulb needs to want to change.
Shabbat
All right, my friends, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much for
shalom.
being here.
Thank
I
you,
will be on
everybody.
vacation the next 2 weeks. Our next meeting will be in 3 weeks. And if you are still watching on the video, thank you so much for being here. Head over to rabbigregmarcus.com and sign up to be on the Torah Tuesday, Torah Saturday email list, and come join us in person. Until next time.
Shalom.
Shalom.